Beyond the Wall. Jon Snow is part of a group of 20 wildlings, under Tormund's command, sent ahead of Mance Rayder's main army to scale the wall and attack Castle Black from behind. While gathering firewood with Ygritte, Jon is questioned by the warg Orell about the Night's Watch defenses. Orell, having seen through his eagle's eyes, inquires about the patrol frequency atop the wall. Jon explains that patrols are typically conducted in teams of 4. 2 builders assessing structural integrity, and 2 rangers providing protection, but their frequency varies. Orell then asks about the 19 castles along the south side of the wall. Specifically, how many are currently occupied. Though reluctant, Jon reveals that only 3 are manned: Castle Black, which the wildlings already know about, Eastwatch by the Sea on the eastern end, and the Shadow Tower on the western end. When pressed about the garrison size at Castle Black, Jon hesitates, but under threat gives an exaggerated number, 1,000 men, though in reality, the garrison is much smaller, closer to 300. Tormund warns Jon that if he is lying, he will suffer a gruesome fate. Afterward, Jon and Ygritte walk away, but she snatches his sword, Longclaw, prompting him to chase her. She leads him into a cave warmed by natural hot springs, where a waterfall and a pool create a secluded retreat. Ygritte begins undressing, testing Jon's loyalty to the wildlings by encouraging him to break his Night's Watch vow of celibacy. Though hesitant and inexperienced, Jon eventually gives in, and they share an intimate moment. Later, as they lie together, Ygritte curiously asks about Jon's affectionate technique, wondering if it's a practice of southern lords. Jon admits he has no prior experience, prompting Ygritte to playfully recall past lovers among the wildlings. She mentions a red-haired boy, considered lucky among her people, and a then warrior who lacked fluency in the common tongue. They then slip into the hot springs for a warm bath, embracing, as Ygritte wistfully expresses her desire to stay in the cave forever, away from the harsh realities of war. In Slaver's Bay, Daenerys Targaryen leads her newly freed unsullied army north toward Yunkai, the next of the 3 great slaver cities, after sacking Astapor. Along the way, Esser Jorah Mormont shares a conversation with Esser Barristan Selmy, recounting how he was knighted at the end of the Greyjoy Rebellion. Jorah describes being the second man through the breach during the Siege of Pike, right behind Thoros of Myr, who charged in wielding his flaming sword. Barristan finds this amusing, as he had been leading the assault on Old Wick at the time. Jorah recalls how King Robert Baratheon personally knighted him for his bravery, a proud moment in his life, though at that moment, his main concern was the urgent need to relieve himself after being trapped in plate armor for 16 hours. The conversation shifts to Robert himself. While Barristan acknowledges Robert as a great warrior and a good man, he laments that he was a terrible king. Reflecting on his own past, Barristan expresses regret for spending years defending rulers who did not deserve his loyalty, first the Mad King and then Robert. However, he maintains that a man of honor must uphold his vows, regardless of whether he serves a drunkard or a tyrant. Now, he longs for the opportunity to fight for a leader he truly believes in. Jorah assures Barristan that Daenerys is such a leader, while Barristan agrees that she will have wise advisors. He warns that Jorah's past as a slave trader could tarnish her reputation when she returns to Westeros. Jorah acknowledges his moral stain, but subtly shifts the conversation, probing for information about Robert's small council. He specifically asks if anyone opposed the king's decision to have Daenerys assassinated, hinting at his own past as an informant for Varys. Jorah had relayed news of Daenerys' pregnancy, which led Robert to order her death at a small council meeting attended by Eddard Stark. Jorah inquires whether Barristan, as the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, had a seat on the council. However, Barristan explains that Robert never truly trusted him due to his history with Aerys II and his role in killing Robert's friends, so he was excluded from small council meetings. Jorah, relieved that Barristan never learned of his former betrayal, exchanges tense words with him, asserting that while Barristan only recently joined Daenerys, he himself has been protecting her from assassins for months. He also reminds Barristan that he is not the Lord Commander here. Jorah takes orders only from Daenerys. Meanwhile, Daenerys, accompanied by her translator and aide Missandei, meets with the Unsullied officers. Addressing them in Low Valyrian, she declares that they are no longer slaves, but free men, now able to make their own choices. She instructs them to select a leader among themselves. The Unsullied part ranks, and one soldier steps forward. She asks for his name, and he introduces himself as Grey Worm. Confused by the demeaning nature of the name, Daenerys turns to Missandei for an explanation. Missandei reveals that the Slavers of Astapor force Unsullied trainees to take humiliating names, usually combining a color with a type of vermin, such as Grey Worm, Red Flea, or Black Rat, to strip them of personal identity and reinforce their expendability. Disgusted by this practice, Daenerys commands that all Unsullied should either reclaim their birth names or choose new ones for themselves. However, Grey Worm insists on keeping his name. He explains that his birth name is cursed, as it belonged to the boy who was taken into slavery. Grey Worm, however, is a name of fortune, as it was the name he bore when he was freed by Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen. Deeply moved by his devotion, Daenerys is touched by the loyalty of the Unsullied and the faith they have placed in her leadership. At River Run, the young Lannister prisoners Martin and Willem are awakened by the sounds of shouting and fighting outside their cell. Before they can grasp what is happening, Lord Rickard Karstark and his men force their way inside, killing a guard who tries to stop them. Willem, confused, asks if they are being rescued, only to be immediately slain. Martin, terrified, pleads for mercy, insisting he is just a squire, but Karstark ignores his cries and stabs him in the stomach, killing him. Their lifeless bodies are soon laid out before King Robb Stark in Riverrun's main hall. Disgusted, Robb condemns Karstark for needing 5 men to mercilessly execute 2 unarmed boys in a prison cell. Karstark, however, insists that it was an act of vengeance for his sons, who were slain by Jaime Lannister. Robb counters that the boys had no part in his sons' deaths, and reminds Karstark that it was Catelyn Stark who freed Jaime in hopes of exchanging him for her daughters. Undeterred, Karstark argues that since he was denied vengeance against Jaime, he took the next best option, killing Jaime's kin. Robb, furious, reminds him that the squires were mere children, and that his actions were treason, not justice. Karstark dismisses Robb's words, claiming that the real betrayal was allowing their enemies to walk free instead of killing them. When he taunts Robb by questioning whether his father ever taught him that, Brynden Tully punches Karstark, but Robb intervenes. Karstark, having lost all faith in Robb's leadership, mocks him further, calling him the king who lost the North for allowing Winterfell to fall. In response, Robb orders all of Karstark's men hanged, saving one for last so he can witness the others die. Karstark himself is sent to the dungeons. Robb's uncle, Edmure Tully, warns that Tywin Lannister will retaliate severely if news of his nephew's murders reaches him. He suggests burying the boys quietly and keeping their deaths a secret until the war is over. However, Robb refuses to compromise his principles, arguing that he cannot fight for justice while ignoring crimes committed by his own men. Edmure proposes keeping Karstark hostage as leverage to maintain the loyalty of his soldiers. Robb refuses to heed their advice and proceeds with Karstark's execution during a heavy rainstorm. Karstark reminds him that their houses share blood. As House Karstark is descended from House Stark, Robb remains resolute, stating that kinship did not stop Karstark from betraying him and will not prevent him from facing justice. Karstark, unfazed, tells Robb that his decision will haunt him forever, labeling him a kinslayer and declaring that he is no true king. Adhering to his father's principle that the one who passes judgment must carry out the sentence, Robb personally beheads Karstark. As predicted, the consequences are dire. Karstark's forces abandon Robb, depleting nearly half of his army stationed at River Run. Acknowledging his mistake, Robb confesses to Talisa that she was right. He realizes that Tywin Lannister has the advantage he no longer need to attack, as Robb's army is already falling apart from within. The once unified northern forces have lost momentum, and his commanders are divided. Examining a war map with Talisa, Robb sees that his forces are concentrated around River Run and Harrenhal, while the Lannisters and Tyrells dominate the Stormlands and King's Landing. Meanwhile, the Greyjoys occupy the western coast of the north. Talisa suggests taking the fight to the Lannisters, but Robb explains that King's Landing is too well defended, with both Tywin's main army and a strong Tyrell force protecting it, an assault would be suicidal. She then suggests returning to the north to reclaim his homeland from the Greyjoys and rebuild his strength. However, Robb points out that once his soldiers return home, they will be unwilling to march south again, especially with winter approaching. The coming winter is expected to last for years, and without sufficient harvests stored, his people will be reluctant to continue fighting. Realizing that attacking King's Landing is impossible and retreating to the north is unfeasible, Robb determines that his best option is to strike at the Lannisters' weakest point, Castle Rock. By capturing the Lannister stronghold, he can inflict the same humiliation on them that he suffered with the loss of Winterfell, and potentially regain momentum. However, with the Karstark forces gone, his army is too weak to attempt such an ambitious assault. His only hope of gathering enough soldiers is to mend his fractured alliance with House Frey, whose troops abandoned him after he broke his marriage pact by marrying Talisa instead of a Frey daughter. Now, to make his plan viable, Robb must seek to repair relations with the Freys and regain their support.